Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I am back. We just hit 50,000 subscribers, so thank you all so much for the support recently. It's been absolutely amazing. But today's video is another experiment. It's from the 70s. It is the infamous Stanford Prison Experiment. The thing that fascinates me about the Stanford Prison Experiment is it really delves deep into just how evil people could potentially become just with a little bit of power or a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of instruction. So in 1973, a psychologist at Stanford University called Zimbardo really wanted to find out whether the brutality in prison guards was because they were just sadistic wankers or whether it was because of the environment, because they're in a prison and it's thought to obviously be quite a violent place. One of the examples he gave is that maybe personality-wise it's just inevitable. The sort of person potentially that would go for a guard job is maybe someone who wants to be dominant and has quite aggressive tendencies. And obviously prisoners, 9 times out of 10, prisoners tend to have a lack of respect for authority and the law. So there is a conflict right there. On the other hand, it could be that the prisoners and the guards act in a hostile manner due to the power structure within a prison. Zimbardo's hypothesis was that it would be the environment, not the personality, that caused this. So he wanted to test it, and oh my god, did he test it. So the study is relatively simple. They turned the basement in one of the psychology buildings at Stanford University into a mock-up prison. They did psych tests on 75 applicants, of which 21 were successful, and in the end they had 11 guards and 10 prisoners. The roles were given randomly, so you're a guard, you're a prisoner, you're a guard, you're a prisoner. The way that the prisoners were told they were prisoners was very legitimate, i.e. they were literally arrested at their homes, booked at a police station, blindfolded, then brought over to the prison. Very importantly, everyone who was selected had no criminal record, no drug abuse, were thought to be mentally stable, and no psychotic tendencies, for example. So these were just run-of-the-mill, average, normal guys. They were paid $15 a day each, which back in the 70s was a decent wedge. And once the prisoners arrived at the prison, de-individualization began. This was very important to the study. So basically, after they were booked and brought to the prison, they were stripped naked, all their belongings were taken, their names, their identities were taken away, they were given a number, they would only ever be referred to by this number, and they could only ever call themselves by this number. The key to this was that it was basically dehumanizing the prisoners to see how the guards would act, you know, because if you know someone personally and you adopt a connection, it may be more difficult to be dominant over that person. All the guards were dressed identical. They had a khaki security uniform on, they had a whistle, they had a billy club. They also wore sunglasses. This was important because it meant that no eye contact was possible. It takes away, again, that personal touch to a conversation. 3 guards at a time worked 8-hour shifts, and they were instructed to do whatever they felt necessary to maintain law and order within the prison. However, no physical violence was permitted, but as you're about to find out, it got a bit fruity, to say the least. Zimbardo observed both the prisoners and the guards as a acting kind of prison warden, superintendent type figure. It was revealed in an interview on a YouTube original by Vsauce Michael from one of the prison guards that the prison guards were never aware that they were the ones also being analysed. They just thought that this was an experiment for the prisoners and they were put in place just to basically make it feel like a prison. Within a very, very short time, both the prisoners and the prison guards were settling into their roles. Within hours, the guards were already harassing the prisoners, waking them up at 2:30 AM to do prison checks and counts. The counts came as a way for the prisoners to familiarise themselves with their own numbers, but also, more importantly, for the guards to exercise that command, that domineering aspect over the prisoners. The prisoners soon adopted their own role as well, talking about prison issues amongst each other and snitching to the guards on other prisoners. They started to take the prison rules incredibly seriously because they feared that if they didn't follow the rules that there would be punishments that they didn't want to have. Some prisoners even began siding with the guards when other prisoners weren't obeying the rules. The prisoners were regularly insulted, given petty orders, given mundane tasks to do, and quite honestly generally dehumanised on a regular basis. Push-ups were a common form of punishment, but then as it progressed, the prison guards were like stamping on their backs, putting other prisoners on their backs, making these punishments worse and worse. The power well and truly getting to these guards' heads. By the way guys, this was all in day 1. But because day 1 just went rather smoothly, i.e. there was no real rebellion from the prisoners or anything, what happened on day 2 was a massive surprise. On day 2, because of how they were treated on day 1, the prisoners ripped off their caps, ripped off their number badges, used mattresses and bed linen to barricade the doors and block all vision into the cells. The guards called in reinforcements, so all of the guards that weren't on duty came in to try and bring the situation back to normality. It wasn't pretty. The guards used fire extinguishers, which is chilled carbon dioxide, forced their way into the cells, sprayed the prisoners down, stripped them naked and took out the beds, so this couldn't be repeated. So now the prisoners have no clothes and no beds. They just have empty cells to exist in. The ringleader of this rebellion was put into isolation, and after this, after the ringleader was identified and taken away, the guards then really upped their harassment on the other prisoners to try and intimidate them to gain more control over the situation. There was one cell that was selected as like a special cell for privileged inmates. So basically the 3 inmates that did the least in this rebellion were placed into that cell and given special privileges to kind of woo them into becoming grasses. They got to brush their hair, have their clothes back, brush their teeth and eat nice food, while the other prisoners had all their food taken away because the guards literally had 100% control over the lives of the prisoners. They thought it was the right thing to do in the circumstances to remove any food from all the other prisoners. The idea was to break the morale and that cohesion between the prisoners, because divided people aren't as strong as when they're together. This major shift in dynamic and cruelty from the guards actually worked in their favour. They did break the solidarity of the prisoners, and the prisoners became a lot more dependent on the guards. And as this happened, the guards became more sadistic, got them to do real dehumanizing, humiliating things, the kind of things you'd ask a dog. Do you want a treat? Play dead. Do you want a treat? You know, sit. All things like that these guards were doing to these prisoners. Prisoner 8612, less than 36 hours into this experiment, started to break psychologically. He began suffering from acute emotional disturbances, disorganized thinking, uncontrollable crying and rage. So the guards took him out for a meeting, told him he was weak, he was pathetic, but offered him an informant status to try and calm him down and bring him on board. And what this did was the prisoner then went back and told all the prisoners that no matter what they say or do, they cannot leave. But this prisoner in particular started to really act fucking crazy, so the psychologists who were doing the research decided we need to let this guy out, so he was released. A few days into the experiment, there was a planned parents' visitation hour, so the guards were worried that they would see the state of the prison or see the state of their sons and want to pull them out. So what they did was they gave them a big meal, they went and tidied all of their cells, they allowed them to shower and wash and, you know, get themselves looking nice for this meeting with the parents. This all went relatively well, but after the parents' visitation hour, rumour quickly spread that there was an escape plan in place from the prisoners. So in order to try and prevent this, they actually tried to enlist the help of the police department to enforce the prisoners, and what they also did was they upped all the menial tasks and really upped how fucking sadistic they were. They made the prisoners at this point clean the toilets with their bare hands. They then had a priest come in, and this priest used to work as a chaplain within a prison, so Zimbardo wanted to basically find out how his prison was faring against real prisons. And to be honest, this priest didn't really help matters, as he interviewed the prisoners one by one and actually told them they cannot leave this prison without the help of a lawyer. Again, reinforcing that these guys cannot leave. It's just a social experiment, do you know what I mean? But they were not allowed to leave. It's mad. This really shows the extent of how bad this experiment was and how much it got into the minds of the participants. Whilst the priest was talking to prisoner 819, 819 broke down hysterically into tears. He was inconsolable. Because of how he was acting, the psychologist decided to remove the chain and ball from his leg, remove his cap, remove his uniform, take him to a nice isolated room, promised him that they'd give him food and see a doctor. Whilst this was going on, one of the prison guards got the prisoners to line up and chant out loud, Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. The psychologist realised that prisoner 819 could hear this chanting, and it was just adding fuel to the fire.
And he said, I can't leave. And he's crying, and he says, I can't leave. I said, what do you mean you can't leave? He said, no, I have to go back, because I don't want them to think, you know, that I'm a bad prisoner. And that's when I really flipped out. That in such a short time, you know, a college student's thinking could become so distorted. I said, you're not a bad prisoner. You're not a prisoner. And this is not a prison. And it was this thing where he opened his eyes. It was just really like a cloud being lifted.
This was a wake-up call for Zimbardo. He realised just how bad this experiment had gotten. And actually, he realised that in himself, he got so into character that he was no longer looking at this from a psychological point of view as a psychologist. He was actually looking at this as a prison superintendent. And so the experiment that should have run for 2 weeks, on the 6th day, was cancelled. They were released, and this was put down to breakdowns of prisoners and excessive aggression by the guards. I'm just going to read Zimbardo's conclusion of the Stanford Prison Experiment. Revealed how people will readily conform to the social roles they're expected to play, especially if the roles are as strongly stereotyped as those of prison guards. I think this is this experiment fascinates me. It really, really does, because I feel like it explains a lot within society. It explains a lot within history. You know, retail management. Not all of them, because obviously this is heavily personality trait as well, but there are certain managers. One I've had, store manager at Pets at Home, he knows exactly who he is, don't know if he's still watching. Hello mate. He was a wanker. The power had clearly gotten to his head. He felt he was superior than anyone else, and therefore he could treat them however the fuck he pleased. And that is not right. But that is kind of the conclusion we find in this experiment here. People are given a role above others and they abuse it. Especially, it seems, if they believe it is for the greater good. Like, you know, the prison guards in this experiment, they felt like they had to be real aggressive prison guards, maintain control over this prison environment for the greater good, for the experiment, for the good of the experiment. Maybe some managers within workplaces feel like they have to be arseholes, they have to maintain control over the situation for the greater good, for the company, you know. And it's just like, you know what, a little bit of kindness goes a fucking long way. It really does. The best manager I've ever had, I'm going to name drop him, Greg Ford. I was a lifeguard at Haven, Hopton. He was the fucking best manager I ever had. Do you know why? There was a line that you knew you didn't cross, okay? A line of respect. But also, he was fucking lovely to you. He would go to the ends of the fucking world for you, and he was a great laugh. But you still knew that there was that line you didn't cross. And because he was so fucking nice, because he was such a great fucking guy, and because you knew that he had your back, you didn't want to fuck around, you didn't want to take the piss, you didn't want to abuse that. But then sometimes, when there's an authoritative figure who's a wanker, you think, fuck this guy, much like the prisoners, fuck those guys, because they were fucking wankers. Do you see what I mean? So a little bit of kindness, a little bit of mutual respect goes a fucking long way in society. And I feel like the Stanford Prison Experiment is one of those great prime examples. It shouldn't have happened the way it did. And it certainly wouldn't happen now with all the morals and ethics in place for scientific testing. But historically, I feel like it has a massive, important message in there. I really do. What do you guys think? That was a Stanford Prison Experiment, guys. I would love to know, I really would. Like I said earlier, we've hit 50,000 subscribers. That is fucking amazing. Thank you so much. 100k is next. I want it this year. I want to get 100k in 2020. How much I've grown this month? Mathematically, it is possible in the 8 months remaining in this year. But I think that we can smash this, guys. I'm going to keep on bringing you all the content that you want. I'm going to keep on pushing this as hard as I can. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Sweet one, guys.